when you walk into sort of your early days, walk into meetings with prospects, with CISOs, maybe their advisors, what have you. But the question becomes, what kind of feedback did you get from them that perhaps surprised you, where perhaps they said, no, you need to adjust, where your solution is perhaps evolved as a result of feedback from CISOs and from customers in ways that you didn't expect?
I think where we kind of changed a lot of our approach was in our early days.
If you guys can give like a concrete example of like, hey, we walked into the meeting, thinking we were going in this direction. We walked out of that meeting and we said, well, we didn't really think about that, but we should do it a little bit different. That's kind of a cool story.
Yeah, I think because all of our research at UT Austin was on information flow control, actually building the control into the application so that they can control within the application what data they could access. After a number of advisor meetings, meeting with different analysts and all those kind of things, I think we quickly realized that that was great, but that didn't solve their current problem. And their current problem is they just didn't know what data they had or who has access to it. They didn't want to build something new. They wanted to fix what they had. They had all this, I wouldn't call it legacy, but they had so much data within their environment that they just didn't realize, well, they were struggling to deal with, and they knew it was a big problem. They didn't have any way to provide the visibility and transparency into that fine-grained data of, this data here, who has access to it? What is it? They just didn't know. So I think that those number of meetings with advisors and early stage kind of design partners was just fundamental to our organization in going, let's start with visibility and then add the protection layers on top of that and not try to do it the reverse.
It's amazing how much of the learning is about how you operationalize your product. I think from our perspective, the one thing we learned is that in many cases, security is reactive, and when it gets to threat detection, in nature, it's reactive because you're trying to detect an incident as it happens. What we discovered, which got us to what we announced recently, which is basically autonomous purple teaming, we realized that we need to become a proactive solution. And with that, we basically decided to go into an automation, a proactive approach where we're the only solution today that provides continuous proactive protection in threat detection. We added basically an offensive AI-based red team that fights against our CDR all the time, AI against AI. And that allows our customers to basically be ahead with threat detection, see their threats ahead of time. Therefore, they can prepare automations to these threats, and they can operationalize basically much faster. So from our perspective, our learning was, going from a reactive approach to a proactive approach, which brought us to this autonomous purple team, AI against AI, which is pretty unique in what we do today and provide to the market.
David?
So I remember in the very early days in Simplicity, we had 2 meetings at the same week. And each of those security leaders were giving us a quote that I use ever since. One was telling me, the biggest problem I have is that I'm responsible to reduce risk in the organization, but I'm not authorized to do that. I cannot install a patch, I cannot change a code, I cannot reconfigure anything, and I'm living in that gap daily. And I need to kind of make other people work for me, and I'm doing that in the most ineffective way I can. And at the same time, there was another CISO that was telling us, guys, all other tools put yet another list on my table. I'm just looking for something to take things off my table and get that at the hands of the people that can actually do something about that. And what we did after those 2 meetings is, as we were going through ideation and talking to people on what's the problems that we are trying to solve, we continue to speak to the security team, but we ask them every time, can you introduce us to your developers? Can you introduce us to your IT guys? I want to hear how they see the problem from their point of view, because at the end of the day, those are the people that take actions. We are trying to help them, to govern them, to give them some guidance, but they need to do that together with everything else that they are doing in their day job. And kind of starting to look at the problem not from the security point of view, but from the fixer's point of view, was kind of bringing a lot of changes through how the platform has evolved eventually and the benefits that it gives to the customer.
Yeah.
Yeah, so essentially, every time you have a situation where you have one organization, one company owning the data, another company owning the code or the model, and a third company owning the infrastructure, you run into a security and a privacy issue, right? Because these companies don't necessarily, they want to collaborate. Collaboration is sort of the key to a lot of what we do, but they don't necessarily want to or are not even allowed to share the data with one another. So the big shift to me, and what I was very sort of surprised to see, and again looking back, I'm maybe not should have been surprised, is we, maybe a year and a half, 2 years ago, a lot of the use cases we're seeing were around cloud migration. Somebody else is running my infrastructure, I have this privacy or security problem around it, and how do I basically protect my data and my code on somebody else's infrastructure? In the last year or so, again, maybe unsurprising looking back, is a lot of it now is around AI. And we're seeing, this is just a huge shift, that it's top of mind for probably everybody in the industry. And it had a huge effect on what customers are talking to us about and what they're using us to solve. And basically, if there's multiple pieces of data coming from multiple companies, or you want to use somebody else's model, or you want to run that model in somebody else's infrastructure, again in the cloud or somebody else's infrastructure, every time a situation like that happens, that's where we come in and provide value, and we can unlock these use cases, we can enable these use cases. And that was just a huge shift that we, again, before a year and a half ago, we just couldn't anticipate how big it's going to be.
So we got just one clap. Alon Jackson, CEO of Asterisk. Welcome.
Thank you,
You wanted
everyone.
to make a grand entrance. Well, you got it. So Alon, real quickly, you all settled? Good?
I'm good.
Okay, cool. So, quick intro. In 60 seconds, because we got time to make up here, your company, right, where you're based, but just answer the last question. The last question is, so we're walking down this entrepreneurial journey, and when you walk into a customer meeting, particularly in the early days, pitching your solution, because you're a solution provider and you know everything, and we're trying to understand, like, what did you learn from CISOs and customers, and how did your vision and your solution change as a result of that feedback? Give us an example.
Cool. Thank you. So first of all, I wonder who noticed that one face is missing in the beginning here. Just a quick check. So I'm the founder and CEO at Asterisk. We secure non-human identities, which means everything that enables access to our critical system that's not a user. Basically, machines are outnumbering humans. AIs are the modern type of machines that are connecting, helping us write emails, helping us write code. And we're integrating and really creating these workflows, right, to help our enterprise work together. And we protect exactly those API connections, SSH keys, service accounts, whatever that's used, credential management and stuff like that to connect stuff with each other. I think I'll start from the ideation. So maybe where we are. So we're post A. We raised $40 million to date. The NHI is non-human identity market. This is becoming really hot in the last half a year. I'm sure a few of you have heard about the new letters. Thinking about what we learned from our customers, we actually learned from our customers from the very, very early days. The way we started is actually leaving our jobs and waiting, half a year in the Tel Aviv garage. And we talked with more than 100 CISOs and security practitioners to learn from them. And what we looked for is something that's not solved, important, and will grow in importance as time goes by. So this is a very kind of a sweet spot, which is really hard to tackle, right? If something is important but not unique, so it's out there, a lot of solutions for it, right? If something is unique but not important, so maybe it's good for academia. So we actually learned from all these over 100 conversations and came really to the understanding that non-human identities is just being underserved today, despite the fact that it's a real pain for most of the people we talked about. Since then, it's been a crazy journey for about 3 years.
Next question, Ravid. You talked about remediation and kind of, I guess the difference between sort of responsibility and authority and sort of that tension between it. But I guess what is remediation? Why? Two questions. I mean, why is remediation such a hard problem? But the follow-on question, like, what about remediation at scale? What does that look like? And how does, because you have a hard problem to solve, but then you're trying to think about it at scale. What does that even mean?
So it's an interesting question. Whenever I use slides, and I have a very good slide that shows, like, if you look like 8 to 9 years ago about security testing or security scanning, you probably have 2 logos on that slide, like vulnerability management, one of the vendors, or something like that. And if you look at it today, the typical organization probably have like 20 to 30 different security testing tools, internal, external, cloud, code, infrastructure. And so there is a lot of tools on one hand, and on the other hand, what you actually see is that the fixing organizations are becoming faster, more agile, adopting new technologies much faster. And what happened is that the old practices that have been used with the security teams just doesn't scale, because from a problem that was like 1 tool or 2 tools to few operating system platforms like Windows and Linux, you got to the point that you have 15 tools on one side and like 300 development teams on the other side. And the product security team cannot just handle that manually or using the old practices. So I think that what was changed is the amount of tools, because the attack surface has changed dramatically, and you need to specialize in each of the aspects of that attack surface. And at the same time, the rate of adopting new technologies and the agility of the fixers teams actually requires them to react much faster. And I think that that's created, and I'm not sure that everyone will agree with me, but I'll say it anyway, made the security team the bottleneck to the remediation process. And therefore, we need to help them to actually scale by putting automation, putting orchestration, putting productivity capabilities into what we do. Because at the end of the day, the reality today is that if you don't scale, you fail. And the need to scale for the risk remediation, risk governance teams is fundamental these days in order to keep up with the level of risk that is being introduced to the organization with new technologies.
Yeah. When I read your submission, you talked a lot about sort of creating a trusted execution environment in the cloud. You know, my sort of framework in thinking about T's was always on mobile devices. And then so just how do you extend that concept from a mobile device to the cloud? And then when you introduce kind of also encryption into that world, how just it's a big technical problem, and how did you guys tackle it?
Yeah, so I'll try to kind of go very quickly in 45 seconds. So yes, trust execution environment started on the mobile. And to some extent, that's how we protect things like fingerprint or Face ID. All the biometrical data is protected on the endpoint. And that's why, if you remember the case with Apple and the FBI, where the FBI got phones that they wanted to get the data in. They went to Apple, and Apple told them, we can't help you. And that's because of the trusted execution environments. Apple itself can get access to the data on the phones. So what happened in the industry was that the CPU and GPU vendors, so Intel, AMD, NVIDIA, have decided to expand it to the server side. And now every CPU that's been shipped in the last 4.5 years by Intel and AMD has a trusted execution environment inside. It's moved to GPUs. NVIDIA has made a lot of announcements. They're shipping their GPUs now with trusted execution environments. And what this allows you to do is, for the first time, run code and data in a way that even if somebody gets full access to the infrastructure, even if it's root access or physical access to your infrastructure, they can't get any access to the code and the data inside of that infrastructure. And that's just a huge shift in how we can do security. Just can simplify a lot of things and can finally protect the data end to end. To some extent, the data security problem we've always had is that we figured out a way to protect data in transit. We figured out a way to protect data at rest. But there was never a way to protect data in use, meaning when an application needed to process data, it had to decrypt the data, load it to memory to process it, and at that point the data was exposed. So for the first time, we have a way to finally solve that huge risk. But the other way is to think about this is data is born in use. Data is born when the application is up and running and processing data. So when you have the ability to protect that, you can automatically protect the data coming out, going to the network or going to storage. And that's essentially what trusted execution environments on the server side provide, and that's why for the first time we can just take Again, that's what got me so excited about this. This is the next big enabler because it allows you to take any piece of data, any piece of code, and just put it in any environment without risking the security or the privacy of the data.
That's cool. And another, sorry with too many technical questions, but fascinating by learning a little bit more about these solutions. So, Claude, when you, again, for an old fuddy-duddy like me, thinking back to like DLP, DLP 1.0, and sort of the vision of DLP, we understand conceptually why it's needed, but I guess maybe why did DLP 1.0 sort of fail to live up to the expectation, the hype, if you will, with all due respect to the DLP vendors out there. But you don't refer to yourself as DLP 2.0, but it's just sort of, and so apologies to your marketing people, but that's kind of what I landed on. How is this different, and how is it? Is it just a matter of technology? And tell us a little bit about sort of the evolution from your perspective.
I like to think of it as the kind of left of boom, right of boom analogy, right? From DLP perspective, and there's still a need for this. It's right of boom. You are being reactive as things leave your organization. What we kind of say is we're actually shifting some of that data security left of boom, so shifting it to where it actually, the breach originally happens, which is someone has access to the data. You can be proactive and kind of address those access controls earlier on in the life cycle, but you can also detect when someone who shouldn't be accessing their data accesses it for the first time. So that kind of paradigm of you're looking at shifting DLP left is where we kind of focus our kind of story on.
Okay, thank you. And you said something in intro that kind of, I want to follow up on. You talked about this, battling, if you will, between different AIs, almost like red, blue, purple. How do they, really quote fight against each other? I mean, how does it work?
So first of all, our technology and experience technology mode was built around threat detection. We've been protecting numerous environments in threat detection for many years. And with the advancement in generative AI and our expectation that now people start to realize, by the way, that generative AI will change the way companies are getting attacked. It will lower the bar for attackers and the pace and velocity of attacks. We realized that we need to get our customers prepared for the risks that they are going to face. So what we did was to go and basically build this red team AI-based that is fighting machine against machine in our environment. It is basically reading the inventory and prioritizing, by the way, by the business needs. So we are allowing our customers to basically prioritize the risk based on the business value of the systems. And we're basically stressing and building attack simulations on the actual customer environment. We are simulating those against our CDR, and we show our customers how threat detection will look like before an event is happening. So from the way we actually build it, we have the red team AI fighting against the blue team AI. They do it machine against machine. You can also execute and simulate in real life. And that provides to our customers basically almost like a breach time machine. Think about our customers. How much would a CISO give to be able to roll back time from a breach to before the breach happened, now that they know it, and they can actually be prepared for it? That's actually what we're giving them. We're giving them this simulation that gets them prepared to the breach before it happened.
That's great. So, Alon, also like a semi-technical question for you, because one of the things you talked about, sort of these non-human, identities, things like APIs, OAuth, tokens, service accounts, et cetera. I guess, other than being non-human identities, what unites these elements? What technical leverage do you get across these elements, and how does it expand your scope of coverage?
That's actually a great question, and it's technical and also not very technical. When you think of it these days, access management is the modern firewall. That's how it works. And the problem is across environments. It's SaaS, PaaS, IaaS, Our largest customers are obviously hybrid, and they're going to stay hybrid forever. And that's a big problem. That's a big problem, especially considering that all our solutions today support user access management. It might not be perfect, right? We have it 80%, 70% covered. It will never be perfect, right? We all know that. But the non-human side is completely wide open. Obviously, the Okta, SailPoint, and other identity solutions won't help with that. The problem is that there are a lot of different protocols, pace, rates, ways of using and connecting these machines, services, AI tools to each other, right? It could be an OAuth, it could be SSH, it could be a connection string, it could be a webhook, which is the other way around, it could be service accounts that actually is, you know, a wild west, right, of connecting stuff. And the fact that we're not securing, right, this identity gap is huge, and it's a big, big, hard problem. When you think of the user side, the protocols, SAML, and single sign-on and stuff like that, right? So we have an IDP. We have a centralized place to manage all these identities. We do not have this, right, in a world where machines are really outnumbering humans. And that's really the technical challenge that we're here to solve.
All right, cool. So you guys, just because we're running out of time, 1 minute each. You know, I want to learn about sort of what a customer deployment looks like, right? When you've kind of convinced someone that they should at least evaluate, test, perhaps POC, POV it, but then you start, okay, what's next? Well, what are the customer hesitations? What an honest, nobody's gonna hold you to this, but what are the honest customer hesitations that you face, the biggest challenges that you face as you move from into sort of the deployment phase, and how do you overcome them? And maybe, I guess, related to that, what does how does the customer deployment process look like? And let's just, Ayala, I'm going to start with you, and just to keep it simple, 1 minute each. Let's go down the line this way.
Sure. So from a deployment perspective, to some extent, as I mentioned, confidential computing was something that was added by the CPU and GPU vendors. It's part of the, it's part of the silicon, and all the clouds have added support for it as well. What we bring to the table is, you can think of us very much like, the VMware of confidential computing. Same as VMware didn't invent virtualization. It was there in the CPU, it was there in the operating system. VMware just made it very simple to use virtualization. We do the same for confidential computing. So what we essentially bring to the table is that simplicity of being able to run whatever you want, or sort of everything in confidential computing, or the pieces that you want to protect. And that's why we focus a lot on making the deployments extremely, extremely simple. We connect to the Kubernetes services that our customers use. We connect to whatever key management solutions our customer use, and we just make it a super simple way where you take sort of a snapshot of what the application looks like to make sure that you're running the right application, and then you just deploy it in the cloud, on-prem, wherever you want to run your application, and that's pretty much it. So for us, it's a very, very simple. We make it very, very simple for our customers to deploy this. And to some extent, that's the value we bring to the table as the company, as Anjuna.
While it's not an accurate quote, Bill Gates was once saying something like, if you try to automate a bad process, you end up with a much worse situation than keep it manual. And I think that when and this is the things that we see with our customer. The lack of technology, the lack of capability to handle huge amount of data, to automate that, end up with a very bad processes. And the things that we are doing with them is to actually using the automation capabilities, using the ability to digest data and analyze it in a very high scale, is to actually take them through a very short exercise of process maturity, of actually identifying what are the things that we can actually do better, and then to roll it out throughout the organizations. Changing processes, sometimes customers see that as a problem, but again, once you have the capabilities in place, once you show your counterparts on the other parts of the organization that things can go better and we just need to be aligned, it becomes much faster. So I think the main thing is to actually move from a manual mindset to an automated mindset, and that requires some shifting in the way the organization works, and that requires a lot of thoughts and efforts from the customer, which we help them to do in a very easy way.
Okay.
So in our case, the onboarding and the deployment is really, really simple. We are cloud native, we're agentless. It's onboarding us takes minutes, and you get the value really, really fast. Our ability to basically integrate different pieces, bridging the gap between threat exposure to threat detection, makes customers more efficient. We've built a solution with TCO in mind because of the cost of telemetry. So we try to make onboarding as seamless and easy as possible. And we actually see that a lot of the things we did, we're learning from customers on building the automation, providing this trust, making sure that our solution is cost effective.
What?
From our perspective, I think we're dealing with data. We're dealing with the most sensitive data within an organization. Our deployment model addresses that by actually deploying within your cloud environment or within your environment so that your data never leaves your control. It inherits all your security controls within your environment. And we don't kind of hide behind, we only take metadata, etc. We've just done our first air-gap deployment for a federal customer, entirely with their environment, with no access from Symmetry to their environment. So I think what we've kind of heard from our customers is if you're serious about protecting data, you have to start from protecting that data as a data security vendor itself.
Thank you. So for us, it's very simple, again, with an analogy from the user access side of things. So just like you hook up Okta to different core environments and it'll help you manage the user access, you hook Asterisk up to your different core environments and we'll help you manage the non-user access to that side. Usually on average, we find around 10 times more non-human identities than human identities. So if you have 1,000 employees, we'll find 10,000 non-human identities were created. Many of them were created before these employees came or after they left and unmanaged. So that's kind of a snapshot you get on day one. And then the idea is really managing it right through the life cycle of creating these credentials, creating these connections on a daily basis. Thank you.
Thank you.